Today's video, we are talking about how to collect data and different types of observational studies. The standard we are talking about is MM3D3, which means we are talking about things with data analysis, especially stuff with observational and experimental studies. Now, I know it says entry 27. Yours may be different, just depends on where we are in the year. Now, an experimental study is the first definition you'll need. So you may need to pause this and write down. Make certain to abbreviate as you need to. Now, an experimental study is a study where the members are randomly assigned to groups where they are not already pre-grouped. They walk in, they just say go this way or go that way. And then each group corresponds to a treatment. Now, a treatment could be different types of things. It may be different types of recipes of a product. It may be different types of ways an advertisement is shown. It's just different types of the same thing. And then they're going to control the outside factors so that the relationship between the explanatory and response variables can be examined. The explanatory is that's the thing that didn't change. The response is the thing that's going to change. So, and then especially they add this little thing on the end, when the experimental units are significantly large, a controlled study with random group assignments is used. So that's an experimental study. Our next set of definitions are we have these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 things right here. So experimental units are the first one. These are the study participants. So that means that these are the people. So if you need to, make yourself a note that these are generally people. Sometimes you hear about them being animals, but generally it's people. Now the control group in an experimental study, this is the one that does not change. So remember, there is no change involved. Observational study, this is a study where you just watch what happens. You watch it and you record. You do not interact, you do not change anything. We just watch. Now, replication is something we generally don't talk about because generally it's just we're trying to duplicate results we've already seen before. So for our case, we generally do not talk about replication. Response, though, on the other hand, is something we do talk about quite a bit. Response is going to be the outcome that's analyzed in a study. It's the result we want to see. And in that case, it is the dependent variable of the independent explanatory variable. So you've got to keep that in mind. Response is dependent, explanatory is the independent. So at this point, we're moving on to our examples. So take a minute and read your example. All right, so first off, it wants us to identify the focus of the study. So they want us to identify the thing they're trying to look at the most, which is pretty much going to be the speed of the drivers. Now they want us to determine the variable of interest. So what is it about their speed? So if you think about it, they're trying to make them decrease their speed. So their interest is decreasing speed. Now third, it wants us to describe a sampling method to collect data that can attend to the focus of the study and record the variable of interest. So you figure we need probably a list of things going on. So first on our list, we need to know how fast people normally go at different times of the day, because some people go faster at different times. Secondly, we need to go through and we need to place that sign to then trigger, see what happens. So at the third time, we need to see how fast people go now that the sign is in place. And we're hoping once we see that it is a lot slower. All right, example 2. Take a minute and read. All right, so let's go through and sum up our example here. So we have a study conducted to determine if a smoking ban in bars and restaurants altered the patronage to those bars and restaurants. A day of the week and a time was randomly selected. So those things are being controlled. Then the patronage of 8 bars and restaurants, so they're not being exclusive here, were recorded for 6 weeks. So they did some observing. They just kind of recorded things. And it says that 4 of them were in a state that had a smoking ban, and 4 of them were in a state that did not have one. Now, the places were not told that they were participating, so they were just watching because they wanted to avoid the owners creating promotions to try and get them to have better results. So first off, it wants us to identify this type of study conducted. So if you think, we had 2 groups here. We had the groups that allowed smoking, and we had the group that had no smoking. Not by any choice of their own, but no smoking. All right, next, it wanted to determine the So if you think, they wanted to see the number of people who went to each type of place. For the third, it wants us to identify the assignment of group members and state if it is or isn't random. So if you think, there were 8 things, they were put 4 in a group, depending on whether they allowed smoking or not. So at this point, you have to think, is it random or is it not? Well, if they can't smoke, it's really not random. So this is most definitely not random. Now, for the fourth, observational or experimental. They are not changing anything, they're just watching. So this right here would be observational. All right, example 3, take a minute and read. Pause if need be. Okay, so let's go through and sum up. We have a camera manufacturer that are trying to determine how best to utilize the features. They have 200 people who have never used the camera in the study, and they were divided into 2 groups. One group had no materials, so they had no instruction manual at all. Okay, then at this point they also controlled how long they had the cameras for. They had them for a week. Now the second group, they were given the camera, they were given the instruction manual to read before using the camera, and then they also had it for a week. So let's go through and determine the groups being compared. So the first group, these ones had no manual. I feel sorry for them. No manual to help them. Second group, they got an instruction manual. Kind of makes me jealous if I was in the other group. All right, second, we're trying to determine the data being collected. So we want to see whether having an instruction book really helps people. Because some people say they don't even need it. Then third, it wants us to identify the assignment of group members and state if it was or wasn't random. So if you think about it, they were just assigned as they came in. Was not predetermined, so it was a random assignment. Then it asks us experimental or observational. Well, one group got a manual and one group didn't, so this is definitely an experimental survey. So at that point, I believe that wraps up our video. It does.